Hello Pirates, it's good to be back playing the game. I started back on November, so it's been a few weeks and I was a bit confused about how survival worked once we got that new Damage Diffusor System special, which on paper looks a lot better than Hyper 30, but then when I put that on a Praetorian, it didn't produce the results. It barely made a difference. So I had a long chat with Templar and TSM, and they helped me understand a few things, and then I figured out the math behind the principles, checked it back with the Templar, who confirmed that's the right math, and I thought I'd share with you because I'm not certain everybody knows that. And sometimes you spend a lot of time doing Forsaken missions, score a lot of points for a limited armor, or doing pillage to get this new special, and then you put that on your ship and you don't see the results, and you ask yourself why. Does the special suck? And that's not always the case. It's just the matter of how it works. So let's get down to it. So first of all, the basics, right? Survival is an absolute number. You look in the specials in the armor, it comes with like 2,000 survivor, 5,000 survivor. And that number increases your ship's ability to survive damage, right? So you're going to survive for longer. What the game does is then it translates that absolute number into a percentage. That percentage, the conversion from absolute number to percentage, follows a constant, and that constant is associated with the tier of the ship. So for ships that are tier 8 or 8.5, the constant is 64. So that means whenever you have like 6,400 survival, that means you have 100% survival on tier 8. It's a different number for tier 7, it's a different number for tier 6. It's going to be a different number for tier 9. And that's how KIXEYE kind of keeps resetting the survival counter so it doesn't run into the same problems as it did in the past with resistance, where pretty much every ship had 99 point something percent resistance against damage. And that just wasn't sustainable. So the higher your survival is, the lower the fleet's damage at the end of a battle. If you have 1,000 damage taken on your ship and you have 0 survival, that 1,000 damage reduces your ship's health by 1,000. It's very simple, assuming it's a direct hit. If it's splash damage, that 1,000 will splash and do a little bit less than 1,000, maybe 800, 500, depending on how far you are from the point of impact. But to simplify, let's think of a direct hit that hits your ship, 1,000, boom, you're down by 1,000. If you have 100% survival, that means it's doubling your survival ability, so that 1,000 only takes 500 away, right? And that's one way of looking at it. 100 survival cuts damage by half. The other way to look at it is 1,000% survival doubles your armor, your base armor points. So if you have 50 million armor and you have 100% survival, that's like having 100 million armor. You'll survive twice as long. Survival is a concept that applies to PvE, so skirmish, siege, garrison, these kinds of ships, but not to the Conqueror, Interceptor, and Defenders, which are part of the PvP metagame, and they are based on deflection, like the flat amount you take off of every hit. So I'm not going to talk about that here. The main sources of survival. Pretty much every ship now comes with some survival built in. For instance, the Praetorian, when you build it, already has 3,200 survival for explosive and penetrative. Most auras will also increase that survival. Armors for PvE, they increase the survival stat. At the same time, most of them will actually increase the raw ship armor points. So it's like a double positive. You increase the armor and you also increase the survival, so you gain twice. Most upgrades, they increase the survival number. Some specials and some weapons do the same. And I kind of put them here in order of what's most common to what's less common in terms of increasing survival. From now on, I'm going to use a real example. I'm going to use the Praetorian because everyone kind of does FM. Everyone is running Praetorians or aiming to get to the point where you're running Praetorians. So the basic formula is you get the armor points of the ship, and you can see a naked Praetorian has 50.8 million armor. and you multiply by 1 times the percentage survival. Right? So for instance, when I look here, a single Praetorian has 3200 survival against explosive and penetrative. And then it has an aura that affects itself. That aura adds another 1280 survival. So the formula is very simple. You get the 3200 plus the aura, and then you divide that number by 64 because this is a tier 8 ship. And that gives you 70% survival. You get the armor, 50.8 million, times 1 plus 0.7. It's the equivalent of having 86 million armor points. So having the Praetorian as is, or having a ship with no survival stats at all, but with 86 million armor points would be exactly the same. And that's the amount of damage it takes to kill a Praetorian at this point. Our job is now to increase that number, to make it better. So let's look at the auras. So now you put a fleet of Praetorians together, 4 Praetorians and the flagship. What happens now is each ship will have 3200 base, plus the 4 auras of the 4 Praetorians, each one adding 1280, plus the flagship aura, which is a little bit more powerful and adds 1600. In that case, now your survival went from 70% to 155%. Right? When the tortoise formation aura lights up, it's not all the time, it adds another 3200. So for my calculations here, I'm just going to assume best case scenario. Let's assume that the tortoise formation aura is always on. Okay, so in that case, we have 205% survival, meaning you get the base armor, 50.8 million. You multiply by 1 plus 2.5, so 3.05. It's the same as having 155 million armor points. Okay? Now, you're never going to see that in game because the game doesn't calculate when you're looking at the ship stats. It never calculates the impact of auras. This is only calculated during the battle. Since when, for instance, you lose one ship, you lose that aura. Or one ship's too far from the others, you lose that aura. So that changes dynamically. But best case, at this point, you'd have nearly 155 million armor point equivalent because of the survival. Now let's build the Praetorian, right? So the step 1, let's use the F2XM armor, which is not limited, so it's easier to get. I know it's very expensive in Forsaken Mission, but it's easier to get. That one's going to affect 2 things. The base armor, because each plate adds 200,000. And then it adds survival to the 2 damage types the Praetorian will face. If we add 6 of those, each one 2,000, so now we're adding 12,000. Plus the 3,200 we had before. So now we have 15,200 plus the 4 auras, plus the flagship aura, plus the tortoise formation aura. Divide by 64, survival is at 392.5%. The armor also increased, so now you get 52 million armor times 1 plus that survival. And it's the equivalent of having a ship with 256 million armor. So at this point, you see from the base armor, we're having equivalent of like 5 times more armor. Next step, you upgrade that to U1. So the first upgrade takes less than a day. It doesn't change your survival, but it changes the base armor. So the same math, but now over 54.2 million, we go to 267 million armor equivalent to kill your ship. So it's a small improvement. I did the math. So let's say you hit a target and your ships take 1 hour to repair. Once you do that, now it's going to take 4% less. It goes down 2.5 minutes. Small gain. And that's the one thing I want to stress here. The more survival you add, the more armor you add, progressively, the smaller the gain you're going to observe. So in this case, it's just 4%. Now you upgrade to U2, that's a huge jump because now you're adding 6,800 survival to both penetrative and explosive damage. So now we go to 22,000 plus the auras divided by 64 and that includes the armor points here on that 22,000, we're at 498.75%. We do the math, it's the same as having a ship with no survival and 324 million armor. So you see, it's a huge gain, but at the same time, all that extra survival reduce your repair time by approximately 17%, 18%, compared to a U1 ship with the same armors and nothing else. Okay, so what I want to show you is like, if you had 0 survival, 1000 damage hitting your ship, as I said first, means your health go down by 1000. When you have 100% survival, that same 1000 will hit you 500. It's like your armor doubles. That's for the first 100. And you see how the curve here flattens, so it gets to a point where once you're like get to 500, 400 and something now, it takes a lot more. You've got to get to 700% to cut the damage you had at 300%, which was 250 here, 300% damage coming through for every 1000. If you want to cut it in half to 125, you've got to move survival up to 700%. So it's a diminishing returns process here. At some point, you got to look around and say, okay, am I better off adding a little tiny bit of survival here, or am I better off maybe increasing the damage or the speed or the evade of my ship? Let's keep moving here. Praetorian. So when you start talking about the specials, it gets really tricky because the specials now are very specific. Some will affect turrets, some will affect explosives, some will affect penetrative, some will affect splash. And now you got to kind of branch the calculations out to each type, to the source, to the type. Is it a direct hit? Is it a splash hit? Is it a turret? Is it a ship? Is it explosive? Is it penetrate? It's very complicated. I'm going to use a few examples just to give you the gist of it. So turret defense, of course, it's going to affect any damage type, but only coming from turrets. So the survival we had before, once we add, let's say, explosive battery, and it says you get 1800 survival, it doesn't impact your overall survival, but impacts your turret survival. So if all you're taking is turret fire, you see you go up now to 362 million armor point equivalent here versus 325 that damage is coming from ships. If we get the explosive sync drive, and you could be using penetrative sync drive on the Praetorian, it's the same thing except you change the damage type. So it's going to stack, but now it only affects the damage type explosive in this case. So now you got to branch it out even further so that we had different numbers for ship survival and turret survival, and now we're going to have 4 numbers. Ship survival penetrative, ship survival explosive, turret penetrative, turret explosive. Now we're going to have the explosive survival going up from 500 to 517% against ships, 545 against turrets. I did the math, and in the end, what you should actually see, if you already did upgrade 2 and you have all the armors and have everything else, all the auras and everything, that extra 1221 survival should save you 0.5% on your repair time. And when I say that, I don't mean to say, oh, so does that mean explosive sync drives suck? No, it means that at that point, after you did the upgrades, you added all the armor, you did everything else, the impact becomes very small. Now, if you add the sync drive before you do any upgrades, when you still don't have all that extra survival, the impact's much bigger. So it's not that this or that special are horrible, it's that at some point it's not worth anymore. For instance, you can go with the unlimited armor, F2XM, put 6 of them, you're going to have 12k of each resistance. You can put 3 ZM1, 3 ZX1, they're limited, they're hard to get, they're expensive in FM, and that's going to give you 15k of each. So if you do that before you upgrade, that 3k here makes a difference, makes an impact. If that's taking you, let's say, from 250 to 300%, it's going to make a dent. You're going to see a 3, 4, 5% improvement in your repair time. If you're doing that when you're already past 500%, maybe you're going to see 2% gain. And the reality is just like you already have too much survival. So that's the thing. I mean, after 400%, you swap all the armors, you spend a lot of time earning FM points, and you spend a lot of time installing them, and all you're going to see is a 2% reduction. The damage you can take halves at these yellow lines. So if you look at the progression here, right, at 0% you take full damage. Every 1,000 is 1,000 down on your health. At 100%, so one line later here, it's half. Then you gotta go down 4 lines to go to half again, 500, 250. Then you gotta go down 8 lines, get to half again, 125. And that brings me to a test that motivated me to record this video. I went to one of my Praetorians. I have 3 of them that are identical. I went to one of them. They all had Hyper 30, which only gives 540 survival against splash damage. And I replaced that with the Damage Diffusion System, which gives 7,500. Huge gains, right? Not so fast. Because my Praetorians were already so high on their survival, actually replacing one special with the other only gave me a 2% reduction in my repair time. That ship was 2% less damage than the others. So is it worth it? Is it the best use of that special that's limited and I only have 5? Probably not. Right? They're gonna make a much bigger difference on the riots because my riots are still upgrade 1. They're still not fully armored, so if I put that special in, I'm gonna see a huge gain versus putting that on mature Praetorians that already are very high on survivability. Which brings me to the riots. I want to compare something here, right? So when you start with the riot and you build them like this, and I know most people are not even at this point yet, right? You have all the 4 CTX armors, you have concussive battery, you have one of the sync drives. You know, you're going to be in this build at U1, 383% explosive, 398% concussive survival. So from that point on, there's a few things you can do to improve survivability and have a better raid next week. Number 1, if you have, of course, 14 days of tokens around or something like that, build a flag, because the flag has an aura that will add 8,000 survival to both damage types, to all the ships in the fleet. So it's a big win. It's the biggest win you could have. It's A7 the flag. The second win you can have, but that one is ship by ship by ship, is upgrading to U2. And it's, I think, 2 days, 10 hours or something like that per ship. So when you multiply that by 4, you know what? It's still faster than building the flag. The gain, not so big. Another one that's quick. You can replace Hyper 30 with the Damage Diffusion System. That one is going to add 7,000 survivability only against splash damage. So direct hits will not benefit from this special. But it's real fast. I mean, just a few hours, you can fit that to each one of your ships and it makes a big gain. If you have them, you could use the limited armors too, the ZCT or the ZX1. Because that extra armor you're going to gain, and it's 8 hours each, at this point when you're U1 makes a difference. If you're U2, having the limited armors makes a lot less impact. It's going to be a lot less important to you. And you can use the Galea special in place of the Hydro Atomizer nozzle or hand. That one's going to give you 1,600 explosive survival. Again, once you're U2 and you have all the armors and have everything, this here means close to nothing. So you might as well use the Hydro Atomizer nozzle. But if you're in a pinch right now and you just want to make sure your ships don't die too fast, this would be the best choice. So thanks for watching. I know this was a bit of a long video, a lot of information. I hope it was helpful. If you want to see more videos like that, please subscribe to my channel. After you subscribe, click on the little buzzer there so you're going to be notified when I post new videos. I should be posting more, and my goal is to have one about Riot builds in more details coming out soon. See you next time, Pirates, and happy 2020, everyone.